Some people sell their bodies to survive. Ruby Lopez sold everything but her body. The smell of bleach was the only thing keeping her awake as she scrubbed the edge of the toilet in the master bathroom of the Graves estate. The marble floors reflected her tired face back at her like a cruel mirror. She looked too young to be this exhausted. Her hands were raw, her hair tied back so tightly that it hurt. But it was better than having it fall in her eyes while she worked. She had told herself she would last 1 month here. It had been 6 weeks. Behind the locked door, the world of billionaires carried on. Crystal glasses clinking at midnight, laughter that sounded hollow even from behind the walls. Ruby had heard enough whispers to know what went on in these halls when the lights dimmed and the powerful men had too much to drink. Other maids had warned her some girls said yes to the right man for the right price. Others did not say yes, but no one listened anyway. Ruby knew exactly what she was risking every time she scrubbed these floors, but her mother's voice lived inside her like an old song that never faded. Do not give them everything. Do not give them your soul. Do not give them your body unless it is love. Ruby never spoke that part aloud, but every time she smelled bleach or heard the sound of glass breaking somewhere upstairs, she repeated the words silently. They were the last thing her mother had said before the hospital machines went silent, a promise sealed with nothing but a whisper and the warm touch of a mother's hand that Ruby still felt even now. Tonight the promise felt heavier than usual. Maybe it was the way the rain tapped at the small bathroom window like it was begging to be let in. Maybe it was the laughter echoing down the hallway outside, male voices drifting closer than she liked. Ruby's heartbeat sped up. She rinsed her rag in the bucket, dried her hands on her apron, checked her reflection again, and forced her shoulders to stay straight. Her uniform was simple, with a white collar, a plain gray dress, hair pulled back tight, face blank. She had learned to make herself invisible. It was the only armor she had left when the house got too loud and the world pressed too close. A knock on the door made her jump. Before she could answer, the door swung open and a man stood there, leaning against the frame like he owned every inch of her small, frightened world. Nathan Graves, son of Charles W. Graves, billionaire heir. Face made for scandal, a mouth made for half-truths and dangerous smiles. His tie was loose, shirt half untucked, whiskey glass dangling from careless fingers. He looked at her like he was not sure whether to laugh or order her out. "You're the new one," he said. His voice slurred, but his eyes too sharp to match the careless tone. Ruby lowered her gaze like she had been taught. "Yes, sir," she murmured, then bent to pick up her bucket. But Nathan moved first. He stepped inside the bathroom and closed the door behind him. The lock clicked, and her promise echoed in her chest like thunder. Ruby's breath caught. Nathan took another sip of whiskey and watched her like she was a puzzle piece he wanted to break apart. "Tell me something," he said as he leaned closer until she could smell the expensive liquor on his breath. "What is a girl like you doing cleaning a bedroom like mine at 2 a.m? Ruby forced her voice not to tremble. "Earning my pay, sir." Nathan laughed, but the sound was dry and bitter. He set his glass on the counter and reached out like he might touch her face. She flinched before he could, and he stopped mid-motion. His eyes narrowed as if he had found something new. "Are you afraid of me, Ruby?" "No, sir," she said, steady, but her hands betrayed her. "Liar," he whispered. His hand hovered near her cheek, close enough that her skin felt it even if it did not touch. His smile faded into something darker, something searching. Ruby's chest rose and fell as she met his stare, head on. She would not break the promise tonight, or any night like this. She was not for sale and never would be. "I am not for sale," she said so softly she felt her mother's hand in hers all over again. Nathan's eyes flickered. For a second, he almost looked sober. Then he stepped back, picked up his glass, and left without another word. Ruby's knees trembled as the rain tapped harder at the window. Some people sell their bodies to survive. Ruby Lopez would survive too, but her promise was hers alone to keep. Ruby Lopez was 20 years old, but the world had aged her faster than any calendar ever could. She was born in a neighborhood where the walls were thin, the doors never locked, and the nights were too long to dream. Her mother, Maria Lopez, had cleaned other people's floors her whole life, bent over bathtubs and hotel sheets that smelled of someone else's sins. Maria's one rule for her daughter was simple: keep your head down, work hard, trust nobody with your body except the one who will guard it like gold. Ruby's mother had saved every dollar she could to send her only child to school, but life did not care about savings when sickness came. Hospital bills buried her mother before the grave ever did. When Maria lay dying in a charity ward that smelled of antiseptic and hopelessness, she pressed her cracked hand to Ruby's face and whispered the only inheritance she had. "Don't sell yourself. Keep something that no one can take. Give it only to the one who will give you forever in return." Ruby buried her mother in a borrowed dress and went back to scrubbing floors, this time not for pennies, but for the promise that she would not be like the other girls in her block, who traded purity for fake love or fast cash. Ruby worked 3 jobs before the Graves estate came calling. It was supposed to be a blessing: steady pay, private room in the servants' quarters, 3 meals a day if she worked quietly and did not look too long at the doors she was not allowed to open. The Graves estate was a mansion hidden behind steel gates and tall walls that shut the city out like it was a disease. People said it was the cleanest house in the state and the dirtiest secret on the hill. Charles W. Graves was the man who shook hands in front of cameras and ruined people behind closed doors. He smiled like a saint in newspapers, but everyone knew about the maids who left in the middle of the night and never came back for their final paycheck. The house had rules: no questions, no lingering glances, no noise after midnight. Ruby learned them all the first day. She kept her eyes down and her mouth shut. She did not gossip with the other maids who painted their lips bright and laughed too loud in the servant hall. She did not stay near the corridors when the master of the house brought home new donors or new sins. She stayed small and polite and invisible. Then there was Nathan Graves, the only son, the prince of the rotten kingdom. He had been a headline since he was 17, tabloid fodder before he could legally drink, fights in London nightclubs, girls crying outside his dorm, hush money that slipped through velvet envelopes. He had run off to England to escape the shadow of his father, but the shadows followed him there. They said Nathan was poison wrapped in a perfect smile and an Armani suit. Girls whispered about his touch like it was a dare, but they always ended up crying after. When Ruby heard he was coming home, she nearly asked for a transfer, but her supervisor shook her head. They needed maids for the East Wing, where Nathan's private rooms waited behind thick oak doors. The old staff refused to work there. Too many stories, too many stains you could not bleach away. So the youngest and newest girl got the job. The girl too broke to say no, too stubborn to break her mother's promise. Ruby packed her few things, moved to the East Wing, and told herself she would not even look at him if she could help it. But the first time she saw Nathan Graves in daylight, she understood why women fell apart for him. Tall, broad shoulders, messy dark hair that made him look like he never cared enough to fix it, eyes that saw too much and gave nothing back. He moved through the hallways like he owned every shadow, every whisper. Ruby had watched him pass once while she dusted a bookshelf. He had not looked at her, but she felt it, the weight of a man who knew he could snap his fingers and get anything or anyone he wanted. That night she made herself a promise under her mother's promise. She would not flinch, she would not bend, she would not melt for a pair of cold eyes and a broken smile. She would clean his floor and change his sheets, but he would never touch her soul or her skin. She would be invisible to him, a ghost with a mop and a locked heart. But now, as she lay awake in her tiny room tucked beside the grand East Wing hallway, she knew ghosts did not tremble at footsteps in the dark. Ghosts did not feel heat crawl up their neck when the master of the bedroom watched them too long. Ruby curled tighter under her thin blanket, the marble floor below her cold enough to remind her where she was. She whispered into the dark that she would keep her mother's promise. She would survive this house, untouched, even if it killed her to stand so close to the flame and never burn. Ruby knew how to keep her head down. She had been doing it since she was 12 when her mother taught her that sometimes silence was the only shield a poor girl could afford. Working in the East Wing was supposed to be no different. The instructions were clear. Clean Nathan Graves' bedroom when he was gone. Change the sheets when he left for his endless meetings or nights out. Scrub the bathroom before he stumbled back half awake. Do not touch his things. Do not ask questions. Do not linger where you were not paid to exist. For the first few days, she followed every rule. She learned the rhythm of his world by heart, the scent of his cologne that clung to the sheets, the faint smell of whiskey soaked into the pillows when he passed out face down after midnight, the trail of expensive shoes and cufflinks he dropped on the carpet like breadcrumbs for her to find. Every morning she slipped in when the hallway was empty, hands moving fast but gentle, the way her mother had taught her, respect other people's space even if they would never respect yours. She thought she was invisible to him, just another ghost sweeping up pieces of his careless life, but the fourth night changed everything. It was 2 a.m, the house heavy with a rainstorm that made the marble floors cold enough to bite her bare feet. Ruby was on her knees beside Nathan's bed, gathering stray papers that had blown off his desk when the window cracked open. She did not hear him come in until it was too late. He leaned against the doorframe, tie undone, rain dripping from his hair, his eyes dark and amused as he watched her scramble to stand up. She dropped the last sheet of paper. It fluttered down near his feet. He stepped on it just to see what she would do. Ruby kept her eyes on the carpet. She knew better than to meet his stare. The air smelled like wet pavement and expensive liquor. He said nothing for a moment, just watched her chest rise and fall too fast for her liking. Finally, he bent down, picked up the paper, held it out between 2 fingers like an afterthought. "You work too hard," he said, his voice calm, but the edge underneath it scraped her like a knife. Ruby reached for the paper, careful not to touch him. His eyes narrowed when her fingers brushed the edge, but did not graze his skin. He let the paper drop again, this time closer to her chest, making her bend lower to get it. "Is this what you wanted to be when you were little, a maid crawling on the floor in someone else's house?" His tone was soft, but the words were sharp. Ruby straightened slowly, the paper held tight in her hand, her eyes still down but her voice steady. "I wanted to help my mother, sir. She used to clean houses like this too." He studied her, head tilted like he was inspecting a piece of art for cracks. "And did she keep herself this clean too?" The question landed like a slap, though his tone never changed. Ruby flinched but did not step back. She said nothing. He stepped closer, until she could feel the warmth radiating off him. She wondered if he could feel her heartbeat pounding through the silence. Nathan reached up, almost touching the hair pinned tight at the back of her neck. His fingertips hovered just an inch away. Then he dropped his hand, turned away as if he lost interest. "Clean my mess if you like, but some stains you can't scrub out. Remember that?" He moved to his liquor cabinet in the corner, poured 2 fingers of something amber and sharp. His back to her, but she could feel his eyes in the mirror that hung above the shelf. Ruby stood frozen, every nerve humming with warning. She wanted to run, but her feet stayed planted. She forced herself to bend, gathered the last paper, tucked it into the neat stack on his desk. Then she turned to leave, her steps slow but even, her hands trembling only when she was out in the hallway again, the door clicking shut behind her like a threat she could not name. After that night it changed. Nathan began to linger when she cleaned. Some nights he sat at his desk, reading papers he barely seemed to see. Other nights he sprawled on the bed, fully clothed, eyes closed but his breathing too sharp to be sleep. Ruby learned to move around him like he was furniture, heavy and unpredictable. Sometimes he asked her pointless questions just to hear her answer. "What's your favorite color? Do you believe in luck? Have you ever lied about who you are?" Each question poked at something she was trying to bury. Once she spilled water on the floor near his feet. She dropped to her knees to wipe it up. His shoe tapped her wrist lightly. She froze, his voice low enough that she thought she imagined it. Don't kneel for anyone who doesn't deserve it." She kept her eyes on the floor, her breath caught in her throat. She wanted to scream that she was not kneeling for him. She was kneeling for the rent, for the promise, for her mother's voice that told her to stay alive no matter how small she had to become. Nathan never touched her, but his eyes did. They lingered on her neck when she bent to pick up his discarded tie. They followed her hands when she tucked fresh sheets tight under the mattress. They drifted to her lips when she bit them to hide her frustration at how close he liked to stand. She hated how she noticed his smell when he showered, hated how his hair sometimes fell over his forehead when he leaned back in his chair half drunk and too honest for his own good. One night she found him asleep at his desk, head resting on a pile of documents stained with spilled whiskey, his breathing shallow like a man haunted even in sleep. Ruby should have left him there, but something about the way his fingers twitched against the wood made her pause. She moved closer, so close she could see the tiny scar near his eyebrow, so close she could see the part of him that looked breakable. She picked up the empty glass, set it aside, then carefully lifted the papers from under his cheek so they would not stick. He murmured something half-formed, her name maybe, or someone else's. She froze when his eyes cracked open, unfocused but landing on hers. His hand reached out, caught her wrist so gently she did not flinch, his fingers warm where they curled around her skin. "Stay," he whispered, the words so soft it almost cracked her promise in half. She should have pulled away, but she stayed frozen. His grip not tight but steady enough that she felt the tremor running through his arm. His eyes fluttered shut again. His hand slipped from her wrist. She stood there for a moment that felt like a confession. Then she stepped back, pulled a blanket from the foot of his bed, draped it over his shoulders. She left before he could open his eyes again. In the dark of her small room, Ruby lay awake, replaying the way his fingers had felt, the warmth that should have frightened her, but somehow did not. She pressed her palm to her chest, like she could hold the promise tighter if she just pushed hard enough. She told herself he was danger wrapped in silk sheets. He was temptation wearing a broken crown. She told herself she would not bend, but she did not sleep until the sky turned pale and the marble floors outside her door gleamed with the first hint of dawn. Each morning after that night, Nathan looked at her differently. He asked her questions he never asked anyone. "Who taught you to keep your hair so tight? Why do you never look me in the eye? Do you dream of leaving this place, or does it feel like home?" She gave him nothing but polite half-truths. He gave her nothing but half-smiles that felt like secrets waiting to be spent. One evening he came home with blood on his knuckles, a bruise darkening the edge of his jaw. She found him slumped on the bathroom floor, the marble cold against his back. He looked up at her with eyes that seemed more lost boy than billionaire's heir. "What happened, sir?" she asked before she could stop herself. He laughed, but it sounded broken. "I lost a fight I never wanted to win." He tried to stand, but his legs buckled. She caught his arm on instinct, his weight heavy enough to make her knees buckle too, their faces inches apart. She smelled whiskey, rain, and something raw under it all. "Thank you," he whispered into her hair like she was someone who saved him from drowning. She stepped back, steadying him against the sink, her hand lingering a second longer than it should have. His fingers caught hers, but she pulled away before he could tighten the hold. Ruby returned to her quarters that night, with his warmth clinging to her skin like a stain she could not scrub away. She told herself it meant nothing. She told herself it was just a mistake born of exhaustion and fear. But deep down she felt something shifting. A small, dangerous corner of her heart wondered what would happen if she stopped running, if she stopped pretending she did not see him for the boy he still was, beneath all the bruises and armor. She pressed her fingertips to her lips in the dark and promised her mother again that she would not break first, not for him. Not for anyone she would keep her promise, even if some small part of her already knew it was slipping through her fingers every time she let him see the girl she had hidden from the world. Ruby knew secrets were poison in the Graves estate. Every locked door hid a skeleton. Every whisper in the hallway was a threat wrapped in silk, but she never imagined that her secret would matter to someone like Nathan Graves. To him, girls like her were just shadows who cleaned up after his broken nights. Yet somehow, he kept coming back to her shadow, like he needed to stand in it just to feel human. Days turned into weeks, and Nathan's late nights grew longer, his eyes darker, each time he stumbled in past midnight. Ruby kept her head down, kept her promise tight in her chest like a shield. But every time he sat there watching her mop the edge of his marble floor, she felt that shield crack. One night she caught him staring at her reflection in the window while she made his bed. Their eyes met in the glass, and neither of them looked away, until she dropped her gaze and reminded herself who she was, and who he would always be. One afternoon she found him on the floor of his private study, the room that no maid was allowed to touch. His desk was a battlefield of open files, whiskey bottles, and crumpled papers. Nathan lay half on the carpet, half against the mahogany leg of the desk, like a man who had given up pretending he could stand tall. Ruby froze in the doorway. He lifted his head just enough to look at her, and his laugh came out hoarse. "Come in, Ruby. I know you're not supposed to, but come in." She stepped forward only because his eyes begged her to. The smell of stale liquor hit her first, then the blood on his knuckles again. She knelt beside him without thinking. His breath smelled like regret and secrets he was too tired to bury tonight. He asked her why she stayed in this house. She said because she had nowhere else to go. He asked her what she would do if she did have a way out. She said she would run, so far that no marble floor or glass door could ever trap her again. His smile flickered like a dying light. He lifted a file from the floor and shoved it toward her chest. "Read it. Go on." She hesitated, but he pushed it against her until her fingers closed around the edges. She sat back on her heels, opened the folder, and her breath caught. Inside were photos, receipts, legal letters with her name on them, her mother's name, old medical bills she had fought so hard to forget, her application for the job here, every piece of her life that she had tried to keep small and hidden, laid out in neat rows of cold truth. Ruby looked at him, betrayal a hot stone in her throat. "You did this," she whispered. "You went through my life like it was yours to own." Nathan wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, eyes locked on hers. "My father did it. He does it to everyone. Background checks for every maid, every chef, every guard. He owns you before you ever clean a single floor." Ruby shook her head, but the words would not come. Her fingers gripped the folder so hard the papers crumpled. Nathan pushed himself up with effort, his voice softer but heavier than anything she had ever heard. "I saw your promise, Ruby. I saw why you keep your head down. I saw you sending every dollar to that orphanage. I know what you're protecting, and I swear I never wanted to take it. I just wanted to understand why it mattered to you so much when the world does not care if you break or bend." Ruby wanted to throw the file at him, wanted to scream that her mother's words were not for him to hold under a microscope. She pushed past him, but his hand caught her wrist, not rough this time, not demanding. His touch burned through her sleeve like a confession. "I have ruined everything I have ever touched, but I swear I will not ruin this. Not you." She yanked her arm free, her voice trembling with the weight of years she had spent telling herself no man would ever own her. "Then stop looking at me like I am yours to fix. I do not need your pity, or your curiosity, or your broken hands trying to patch what you cannot even hold." She ran from that room, folder pressed tight to her chest like a wounded heart. She locked herself in her tiny servant room and read every page under the thin yellow light until her tears blurred the ink. She hated that he knew so much, hated that he had seen pieces of her mother's handwriting, old receipts for medicine, the last rent slip before the landlord kicked them out, because there was no one left alive to pay. She pressed her forehead to the cold wall and whispered apologies to a ghost who could not hear them. "I am trying, Mama. I am trying to keep my promise. I am trying not to lose myself in this house that wants to own every piece of me." The next day she avoided him, she cleaned the east wing when he was gone, she moved like a shadow too quick to be trapped, but Nathan was always a step ahead. She found flowers on her pillow once, white lilies, the same kind her mother loved. No note, no apology that could ever be enough. She threw them in the trash and scrubbed the bin twice just to wash the scent off her skin. But the house did not let secrets sleep for long. Charles Graves called her name one evening, his voice echoing down the long hall like a promise of something ugly. He summoned her to his office, his eyes cold as the gold watch on his wrist. He asked her why his son was so interested in a girl who cost him less per month than a bottle of his favorite scotch. Ruby kept her voice steady. "I do my job, sir, nothing more." Charles leaned forward, his breath sour with power and something worse. "You think you're different, don't you? You think your little purity makes you untouchable," he laughed, and the sound made her stomach twist. He told her what he did to girls who thought they were above their station. He offered her more money than she could count, just to come to his room for one night. She said no without blinking. He told her she would regret it, and she believed him. That night she packed her tiny bag, 3 shirts, her mother's photo, the envelope of paycheck she had not yet sent to the orphanage. She crept through the east wing, but Nathan was waiting in the hallway, leaning against the wall like he had been carved there. His eyes found her bag first, then her face. "Where are you going?" She did not answer him, tried to push past, but his arm blocked her path. "Ruby, please, don't do this alone," she hissed back, a truth she had held in for weeks. "I am alone, Nathan. You can't save me because I don't want to be saved by someone who thinks my worth is a puzzle to solve." He reached for her again, softer this time, like he was afraid she would vanish if he touched too hard. "I know I broke something when I looked at your life without asking, but I swear to you I did it to protect you. My father, he ruins people. He would have found a way to twist your promise into something dirty." Ruby's eyes stung, but she refused to let him see her break again. Then let him try. "I have survived worse than rich men with empty souls." She stepped around him, her shoulder brushing his chest. He did not grab her, but his voice cracked the silence behind her back. "You make me want to be someone worth your promise, Ruby." She did not look back. She did not let the words catch her heel. She kept moving until the front door swallowed her whole. The marble floor cold under her shoes, like a final reminder that some cages are beautiful, but a cage is still a cage. Outside, the rain waited for her like it always did when her world fell apart. She stood under the old oak near the estate gates, the bag heavy on her shoulder, her mother's promise heavier still. She did not know where she would sleep tonight. She only knew it would not be in a house that thought her worth could be measured in dollars or secrets, or a man's broken apology. Ruby did not know where her feet would take her that night. The city beyond the iron gates felt colder than any marble floor she had scrubbed. She clutched the strap of her old bag so tight that her knuckles ached, but she kept moving. Rain soaked through her thin coat and clung to her hair, but it felt better than the suffocating warmth of the Graves estate ever had. She found an old bus stop near the main road, empty at this hour except for a flickering streetlight that buzzed like an angry bee. She sat on the cold bench, hugging her bag to her chest. She whispered to the photo tucked inside, "Mama, I am sorry I almost lost what you gave me. I will not let them take it. Not now. Not ever." She thought she could sleep there for a while, just enough to figure out what to do next, but the sound of tires crunching on wet gravel made her head snap up. Headlights cut through the dark, and she knew before the doors swung open that it was him. Nathan stepped out. No driver this time, no umbrella, just him in the rain like he had nowhere else to be except in front of her, his hair plastered to his forehead, his breath visible in the cold. She hated how her chest tightened just seeing him, soaked and reckless for her. "Get in the car, Ruby," he said. His voice was tired but steady. She shook her head without standing. "I told you I do not need your rescue." Nathan stepped closer, rain dripping from his jaw, his hands loose at his sides like he was afraid to reach for her. "My father is looking for you. You know what he does to girls who say no? Come with me, please. I will not trust you, I swear. I just want you safe." Ruby pressed her lips together so hard they burned. "I do not trust you, Nathan. You looked through my life like it was yours to fix. I will not be another mess you clean up to feel good about yourself." He knelt in front of her, his jeans dark with rain. The streetlight flickered over the bruise near his temple, the fresh cut on his knuckle where he had fought his father's guard hours ago. "I know what I did was wrong. I cannot take it back, but I will stand in the rain for the rest of the night if that is what it takes to prove to you that I am not like him. I am not asking for your promise, Ruby. I am begging for a chance to protect it with you." For a moment, the only sound was rain slapping the pavement between them. She wanted to believe him, wanted it so badly she hated herself for it. She saw the truth in his eyes, though, something raw and desperate that no amount of money could fake. She stood slowly, her bag still hugged tight. "If I come with you, it does not mean I forgive you." He nodded once. "I know. It means I have one more chance to earn what I broke." Ruby stepped past him to the car. Her shoes splashed through a puddle. She did not look back to see if he smiled. He drove in silence, his fingers white on the steering wheel. Every so often he glanced at her, but she stared out the window, the city lights smeared into ghosts by the rain. When they reached a small apartment building near the edge of town, she frowned. "Where are we, Nathan?" "Killed the engine," his voice barely louder than the rain drumming the roof. "Mine. Or it used to be, before I let my father buy me out of my own messes. No one knows about it now. You will be safe here tonight." Inside the apartment was cold but clean. Bare walls, a small kitchen, a couch that looked slept on more than sat on. He handed her a blanket but kept his distance. Ruby stood near the window, clutching the fabric like armor. "Why do this, Nathan? You have everything. Why chase after the maid who will never give you what you want?" Nathan leaned against the counter, his eyes hollow but unflinching. "Because for once, I do not want what I can take. I want what I have to be worthy of. I want the thing that stays even when the door is unlocked." Ruby did not answer him. She curled up on the couch, still in her coat, the blanket around her shoulders. She watched him pour himself water instead of whiskey, for the first time she could remember. He did not come closer, did not hover. He just sat on the floor across from her, like he needed the distance more than she did. She drifted to sleep, with his quiet breathing as her only lullaby. The storm outside softened to a steady whisper. In her dreams, she heard her mother's voice, but this time it was not warning her to run. It was telling her to wait and see if the broken boy in front of her could really learn to stand beside her instead of over her. The morning came with pale light cutting through half-closed blinds. Ruby woke to the smell of coffee she had not made. She sat up, her coat slipping off her shoulders. Nathan was by the stove pouring hot water into 2 chipped mugs. He caught her eyes and almost smiled, but stopped himself. "Blacker with sugar?" he asked, like they were 2 normal people who could pretend they were not standing on a battlefield made of secrets and old wounds. "Black," she said, and her voice came out steadier than she felt. They drank their coffee in silence. Every so often she caught him staring at the way she held the mug, like the fragile porcelain might teach him how to hold something without breaking it. She set the empty cup down. "We cannot stay here. Your father will find me." Nathan's jaw tightened. "Then we leave before he does. I have money, Ruby. We can go anywhere. Start over." She shook her head. "I do not want to run forever. I want him to know he did not win, that I am not something he can buy or scare into silence." Nathan looked at her like she had given him a language he had never spoken before. "Then we fight him your way, no secrets, no hiding. We make it public. He will not touch you if everyone is watching." Ruby laughed, but it sounded like a sigh. "You think people care about one maid in a city like this? They will care if they see what he does behind the doors they think are so clean." He moved closer then, his hand outstretched but stopping just shy of her sleeve. "I am not asking for your trust yet, but please let me do this one thing right. Let me be the man who does not look away." That afternoon they returned to the Graves estate, but not through the side door like shadows. They walked through the front gate like they owned every stone in the driveway. The staff scattered when they saw Nathan's bruised face and Ruby at his side. They found Charles in his study, the same place where Ruby had once stood trembling while he promised to break her. Nathan stood between her and the older man, his voice calm but slicing through the thick air. "It ends today. You do not touch her. You do not threaten her. You do not own her." Charles laughed, but it cracked around the edges when Nathan slammed a thick envelope on the desk. Photographs, recordings, copies of the same files his father had used to keep people in line for years. Ruby did not flinch when Charles turned that cold glare on her. She met it with the same steel her mother had left in her bones. "I am not yours to ruin," she said, her voice cutting sharper than Nathan's threat. "If you come near me again, I will not hide. I will burn your clean marble world down with the truth you think no one will believe." Charles tried to stand, but Nathan's hand on his shoulder pushed him back into the leather chair. Like a king stripped of his crown, "This is over, Father. She walks out of here free. Or I walk out too, and take every secret you have ever paid to bury with me." They left the house the same way they had come, side by side, but with enough space between their shoulders to remind them that this was not forgiveness, yet it was survival. Claimed out loud for the first time, when they reached the gates, Ruby stopped, turned to him with rain misting her hair. "You cannot buy my promise, Nathan. You cannot break it, and you cannot keep it in your pocket like a souvenir." Nathan nodded, his eyes steady on hers. "I know. I do not want to own it. I want to be worth it." She stepped past him then, her hand brushing his for just one heartbeat of warmth before she let it fall away. Outside the gates, the world waited cold and wide, but this time she did not feel small. Her promise was still hers, but for the first time she wondered if it could be more than just a shield. Maybe one day it could be a gift she gave freely to a man who would stand beside her, not in front of her, not above her, but with her, when she was ready, and when he deserved it. After that day, Ruby thought she would feel free, but freedom came dressed like an empty room, and long nights that whispered questions she was not ready to answer. She found work at the same orphanage her mother had given every spare dollar to. The building was old, paint peeling from the walls, but the children's laughter filled the cracks better than any fresh coat ever could. She scrubbed floors there too, but every mop stroke felt different. It felt like she was giving back pieces of her mother's love in every clean hallway and folded blanket. Nathan kept his distance at first. True to his word, he did not show up at her new job or wait outside the small room she rented above the corner grocery store. He sent envelopes, sometimes with no note inside, just a slip of paper that confirmed he had paid the bills for the orphanage's repairs, a receipt for the new water heater, a check that covered winter coats for the children. She wanted to throw the money back in his face, but the truth was simple. The kids needed warmth more than she needed pride. One evening, after the children had gone to bed, she found him waiting on the front steps, his hair damp with mist, the same gray coat pulled tight around his shoulders like he had been standing there for hours. She almost turned back inside, but something in his eyes made her stay. He did not smile when he saw her, just stood slowly like he had forgotten how his legs worked, without her voice to steady him. "I am not here to ask you for anything," he said before she could open her mouth. "I just wanted to see if you are okay." Ruby folded her arms tight around herself. "I am working, Nathan. I am surviving. That is enough." He nodded like he believed her, but his eyes betrayed him. His fingers drummed restlessly against his leg as if they were begging for her hand, but knew they would not be welcomed. He did not step closer. "I want to tell you something," he said. "When you walked away from my father's house, I thought I had lost you forever. And for the first time in my life, I understood what it feels like to be powerless. I hated it, but I needed it, because it made me see how much of my life was about owning things I did not deserve." Ruby stayed silent, her throat tight with words she would not let out. He went on. "I started therapy. I started saying no to my father's money. I sold the apartment I used to hide you in, because I want to stand in the open now. I want you to know every broken part of me before you ever think about giving me even a piece of you." She did not want to ask, but the question pushed past her lips. Why me, Nathan? You could have any girl, any life, any lie you wanted. Why ruin yourself for a maid who would never touch your bed? Nathan laughed, but the sound was soft and rough like gravel under rain. Because you were the first person who ever told me no and meant it. You were the first thing I could not buy or break. You made me want to be something more than my last name. Ruby looked at him, really looked, at the man who once stood behind marble doors drinking himself numb while she cleaned around his shadows. He was still wearing his expensive coat, but the arrogance had slipped off his shoulders like water. Underneath he looked young and tired and human. He took a careful step closer. If you tell me to go, I will, he said. If you need more time, I will wait. I will wait as long as it takes to earn the right to stand next to you without you feeling smaller because of me. Ruby wanted to believe him, but belief was dangerous when you had spent your whole life telling yourself you could stand alone. She did not answer him. She turned away, left him standing on the steps while the mist clung to his hair. Her heart beat so loud she was sure he could hear it as she closed the door. Days bled into weeks. Nathan came every Sunday evening to wait on the steps. Sometimes he brought books for the children, sometimes he brought food for the staff. He never asked to come inside. He never asked for her time or her forgiveness. He just sat there until the street lights flickered on and the sky turned dark. Then he stood, tipped an invisible hat at her window if she was watching, and walked away alone. The other women whispered about him. They called him the sad prince, the rich man who wanted the girl who had nothing. Some said she was a fool to keep him outside. Others said she was braver than any of them for making him wait. One night, as the first snow fell, Ruby found herself watching him from the hallway window. His coat dusted white, his hands shoved deep in his pockets to fight the cold. He looked up, as if he knew she was there. Though the glass and dark should have kept her hidden, he did not smile or wave. He just stood there, breathing in the cold that she could not feel behind the warm glass. Something in her chest cracked. A small piece of the promise her mother gave her, folding around the truth that maybe keeping herself whole did not mean keeping herself alone. She slipped on her old coat, pulled the door open, and stepped into the snow. Nathan turned at the sound, his breath clouding between them like a secret they both wanted to hold. She did not speak at first, the words trembling inside her mouth. Why do you keep doing this, Nathan? Waiting for something I may never give? He shook his head. Because it is not about what you give. It is about who you are when you choose to give it. I want to be the man you choose, not the man you owe. She reached for him then, just a touch, her fingers brushing his cold wrist, the skin warm underneath despite the snow. You are still broken, she whispered. He nodded. I know. I am learning how to put myself back together without asking you to hold the pieces. They stood like that, her hand on his wrist, his eyes locked on hers as the snow gathered on their shoulders. She did not kiss him. He did not try to pull her closer. They just stood, breathing the same cold night air, until the world around them softened into something almost gentle. When she finally pulled her hand back, he let it go without protest. She stepped back toward the door, but paused. Come inside, she said quietly. Help me fix the broken window in the boys' dorm. You are good with your hands, right? Nathan's laugh cracked through the cold like warm sunlight. I am learning. Teach me. She held the door open for him for the first time. Inside, the children peeked around corners, their eyes wide at the man they knew only as the quiet stranger who brought new blankets and extra snacks. Nathan knelt beside the cracked window frame, tools in hand that Ruby passed him one by one. They worked in silence, his fingers clumsy at first but steady when she guided them, the glass replaced, the cold sealed out, the laughter of the children warming the small room more than any heater could. Later that night, when he stood to leave, she walked him to the door, her hand brushing his sleeve as she whispered thank you, not for the window but for waiting outside until I was ready to open the door. Nathan touched the edge of her hair, not quite brave enough to tuck it behind her ear. I will wait at your door as long as it takes, Ruby. until you know that when you open it, it is not because you have to, but because you want to. She let him touch that single strand before stepping back, the promise still hers, but now carrying the faintest hope that maybe some promises were not chains, but keys, waiting for the right hands. Winter turned to spring before Ruby realized how much had changed inside her small world. The cracks in the orphanage walls were patched now. The children had warm beds and clean clothes. Laughter bounced off the halls like a song her mother would have loved. Nathan still came every Sunday, sometimes with books, sometimes with tools, sometimes with nothing but quiet stories for the children who loved to sit on his lap and ask him questions about places he had seen that they could only dream of. He never crossed her line, never asked for more than she was willing to give. He learned how to mend broken toys and fix old sinks without grumbling about the dirt under his nails. He sat beside her when she filled out donation forms, nodding when she told him where his money would go, never demanding that she thank him for what was always meant for them, not for him. One night, when the first warm rain fell, Ruby found him sitting on the front steps. No coat this time, just a plain sweater and jeans that made him look more like any man than the billionaire's heir he had once been. She stood in the doorway, watching him trace a circle on the stone step with his thumb, like he was counting seconds until she spoke. "You look tired," she said, her voice soft enough that he looked up, startled. He smiled the way he only did for her now. "Tired is good," he said. "It means I worked for something worth being tired for." She stepped outside, the rain warm on her hair. She sat next to him on the step, so close their shoulders brushed, but neither pulled away. He turned his face to her, his eyes calm, but there was still that small flicker of fear deep inside them, the fear that maybe all of this would slip through his fingers if he reached too fast. "Do you ever think about the promise?" she asked, her words so quiet they almost got lost in the rain. "Every day," he said, "every hour, I think about how to be the man you would trust enough to break it for. Not because you owe it, but because you want to." She let that truth settle between them, heavy but not suffocating anymore. She touched his hand resting on his knee, her fingers small and steady. "My mother told me not to give it to anyone unless they gave me forever first. Do you understand what forever means, Nathan?" His throat worked as he swallowed, his fingers curling around hers just enough to feel the heat there. Forever means tomorrow and the day after and every day when it is hard or boring or painful. Forever means I wake up and choose you, even when I am not easy to love. She smiled then, not the polite smile she wore for the world, but the quiet one that came from the deepest part of her, the part that still believed some promises were worth holding until the right hands knew how to carry them. She leaned her forehead against his shoulder. They sat like that while the rain fell soft and steady, the sound of children's laughter drifting from an open window behind them like a blessing. "Someday," she said, her voice warm against his sleeve, "someday I will open every door for you, but not because you waited outside in the rain, because you stepped inside when I was ready, because you stood still when you could have run away like every man before you, because you learned that my promise was never yours to take. It was always mine to give." Nathan pressed his lips to her hair, a kiss so gentle it felt like a vow. "I will spend every day making sure you never regret it," he said, his whisper lost in the rain, but heard deep in the place where her mother's voice still lived. Some promises are not chains, they are keys waiting for hands brave enough to turn them. Some love stories do not break you open all at once, but unfold slow like spring, soft like rain on stone, strong enough to last forever if you dare to trust.